I guess that's the other large life lesson I've learned is that people above tasks. It just is so important to respect those relationships, respect those individuals. Without them, I'm not going to do anything.
Good evening, all. Today we are at Superlawyers with Mr. Bill McCormick. He is a seasoned legal expert and a mentor with over 20 years of experience in the legal industry. Sir has extensive experience in areas such as AI, securities law, corporate governance, among other areas. Additionally, Sir is also passionate about teaching and is also an AI tutor. We welcome you today, Sir, and we are looking forward to gaining valuable insights to your experiences. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Anshi Mudgal. I work as an associate with the Super Lawyers team. We at Super Lawyers aim to showcase inspiring stories that could greatly motivate and benefit our readers, which are young lawyers and the legal community in general. Divya ma'am, I'd like to request you to take the dais now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshi, for the introduction. And thank you, Bill, for accepting our invitation and giving us time. And most welcome. I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you so much, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Divya. It's an honor to be here and such a pleasure to be connected to you.
So what I understand about Bill from his LinkedIn profile is he simplifies the complex by teaching the complex to be simple, which stuck with me. And I realized that we have to understand how he has went through the law journey and connected it with every genre of life. And that is something which we want to bring to our learners today. Thank you, Bill, for being so versatile and being so open to different kind of work profiles, different variety of legal systems where you could integrate variety of things other than only contracts or just going through the law and practice and litigation. And once again, thank you by my heart that you agreed to be here. I'll start the session now, and we'll start with a simple question. The very basic one first would be, you in your profile have described AI as a young associate in the legal field. We would request you to elaborate on how you see that AI is redefining the traditional legal roles that we are used to and the kind of responsibilities that we are looking forward to while either thinking of passing it on to AI or understanding how lawyers can cope with the whole scenario. Most welcome, Will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya. You're killing me with kindness here, especially with that. Start off with a simple question. I think that's a very complex one, but it's one I've given some thought to. So context, I'm sorry, this is going to be a long answer, and I'll make sure I pause so you can interrupt. But I came from manufacturing and engineering background into law, and that's what motivated me to come into law. And I found it very different, the legal industry versus manufacturing versus engineering, that just the accountability and the lack of measurement, it wasn't present. And it was much more training by learning and by apprenticeship. And so much of the law is not taught in law school. I felt like I was much better prepared as an engineer from engineering school than law from law school. And so I look at the law and say, what are the roles and responsibilities? How do we do that? Right? And coming in, I've just observed this can't be, this is just too anomalous. And then I look at medicine and how it's, I'll say, democratized, right? For good or for bad, people will go online and diagnose their own symptoms and think they have some awful disease and go to the physician and no, it's just this, But there's a lot more emphasis on what an individual can do. Most of my career has been spent in corporate law and in corporations. And there kind of saw the accounting and finance teams change from very manual, very rote kind of to very insightful and knowledge and risk-based and with lots of software to help. And on the legal side, it really didn't change very much through those years. So a lot of things happened to change those things. The first general counsel was before my time in the US, Ben Heineman, but not too much else. And the conversion from typewriters to word processors was ahead of my time. But I did get to see the revolution of shepherdizing cases to online. So to check precedent, to see whether precedent was still good, from manual to automated search, from kind of the advent of paralegals. Not that they weren't there, but more and more responsibility being placed on them, then some quality methods being introduced to the law by various firms. So that kind of changed some roles a bit. The computerized search, and even though it wasn't what we have now, it was still much more helpful than the books. So the changes have kept growing, but none of them really fundamentally impacted the profession. And ALSPs came first, alternative legal service providers came first, and they were more specialized in, as the e-discovery in the US became a large portion of litigation practice, they evolved in that area. But again, well, it was kind of new because the technology was new and it wasn't a traditional field for lawyers. So they didn't feel threatened, I don't think. In-house, then we had legal operations, the clock, which is now global, but still mostly US, Europe centered, and the Consortium of Legal Operations. And that started to drive law as a business within the corporations. But again, even though the law was still a relationship business, right? Now, all these various ways to be in the law, whether it's supporting technology, a vendor in special ways, in the paralegal and how skilled they've become and how much trust that they have, or now kind of the contract lawyers, more or less, right? And then of course there are so many legal process outsourcers, and that's been part of that ALSP movement. But nothing has really fundamentally changed the practice. And in the US, we have an access to justice problem. If you're at a certain income level, you really can't afford an attorney. And it's really a pretty high income level, and it's just not right. And that's never really changed. But there are people who are practicing and giving their lives to justice. Divya, you give yourself to so many good aspects of the law and causes. And so, there are all these options, but the fundamental role of the outside law firm counsel hasn't changed. And where I see generative AI is that it has the opportunity to fundamentally change that role in addition to all the others, and leveraging everybody's talent, making everyone more productive, doing less rote work or work that doesn't require us to think at the top of our brains or practice at the top of our ticket. And so I just see those roles and responsibilities all growing in satisfaction and responsibility and fun, I hope. Sorry for the long answer.
Not at all, as long as you enjoy answering them and share your amazing stories and your pointers. We love this particular answer. Given that fact, when you talked about we should not be scared of what is going on, most of lawyers, most of us are scared of one thing, that AI may take over the legal field. But given that fact that you actually are teaching engineers, AI engineers especially, how humans do law in courts, what are some of the most surprising or challenging aspects that you have seen in this kind of collaboration and making engineers understand how we actually do law? How has your legal journey, your law degree, your practice shaped your perspective after being an engineer, explaining the same thing to other engineers?
Well, I think I do the engineering profession a disservice if I claim to really be a professional engineer. But if I can I just digress to the fear of AI? I see that and I understand that. I guess that my response would be that as we broaden the access to legal services and make the services less costly or more productive, I see increased demand from a retail standpoint, from a consumer standpoint. People will be able to afford things, and they'll be love to turn. I mean, they love to outsource everything else, right? If they can buy dinner, if they can have service in their house, if people were to repair things, they'd love to outsource the law. It's just too expensive right now. So I think the demand will go up, and the ability for each lawyer to sustain more clients will also increase. So that's one piece. On the other side, for the corporate practice, I think that we will find that there's a lot more opportunity for problem prevention, not just compliance, but that's part of it, but also root cause analysis and really understanding why people act as they do and changing systems as much. And then, of course, there's still all the work that's going to be done. And I don't see AI as, certainly in my lifetime, and I don't think yours. I wish you a long one, but even in your long life, I don't think that the AI is going to take over. It's always going to be a partner, and it's going to necessarily be an enabler and a tool and a leverage point. So that's why I'm not afraid for young associates who may be entering the practice.
I remember once people used to be very scared of computers as well. They were very skeptical of using it because they thought that it will take everything, every job away. Rather, I feel today in the world, computers or information technology or IT industry is the biggest job provider. So that's something which I always have thought whenever this issue comes, because I'm also an engineer, so I realize that this is not going anywhere. You just have to adapt. That is why I was very much interested in understanding how do you do these mentorings, because I'm pretty sure all these skepticisms issues definitely have come across to you as well through your mentees, that how to move forward and understand this merger, I would say, of engineering and technology and law, and making sure that you are useful enough for the society and for the whole concept to be adaptable and to be accepted in the process. How do you actually guide them or mentor them and make sure that they are not scared?
So for the younger associates, it's really about encouraging them to adapt to this technology and not to be afraid of change, but the pace of change in every element of life is always just increasing. And so it's a mindset, and it's a continuous learning mindset, and it's an optimistic outlook, and it's a matter of controlling what we can control. We can't control our environment, right? So we might as well adapt to it.
So nicely put. You have been an observer of a lot of inflection points, I would say. You have long anticipated those points in legal industry specifically. What factors have you seen or understood in this particular transformation? And how do you see that we are going to have this next decade for legal industry? How are we going to cope with this whole disruptive tech and everything which is going around, be it corporate world, be it simple litigation or any kind of legal practice? So what are your anticipations for those?
I'm not sure how qualified I am to answer that, but I will give it my shot. So I think this is kind of the key legal inflection of my lifetime. And I think we're just in its infancy, and we'll still be 20, 30 years, we'll still be growing and changing rapidly. Change is long overdue. I mean, the law of scrolls in the US, riding horseback with your papers to go from circuit to circuit as the judges were. I mean, we really haven't changed that much. We've improved how we learn, we've improved how we've written, but we really haven't changed that much. So it's long overdue. And here we are. We get the privilege of being the generation that ushers it in responsibly, I hope. And for me right now, responsible means accurate. Responsible means as bias free as possible. A little easier in what I do because right now we're more on commercial contracts and not really so much individual practice. But I think it's very important. As I see the AI tools, they reflect the bias of the past. And that's not right. That's not where we need to be. We need to move beyond that, or we risk embedding that kind of bias into our society in the future. And personally, that's not right. And societally, I think that just will stifle the evolution that we have.
When you talk about bias, now everyone is obviously skeptical about AI biases and everything. You have worked for more than 35 plus M&A deals, and that too across 13 countries. What do you think has been the most important mindset or skill that you have developed, keeping in mind the kind of cultural differences that those countries must have had, the demographic differences? Have they had any kind of impact on those deals? How did you walk through that, and what was your way of making sure that you commit to your legal field, legal community as well, and AI or disruptive tech has also been introduced in the same process? So we would request you to share some views about that as well.
So you hit it that every culture, every country, every region, even corporations all have their same personalities. There are all kinds of cultural ramifications. And I think two things that helped teach me that I learned more in hindsight than I did at the time is humility, because I haven't had the pleasure of doing an M&A transaction or a securities transaction in India. I have had some dealings, but not that. But I don't know all the nuances. I know the objectives of my client at the time. I know some of the common hurdles, but it's the counsel that's advising me. Even if they're relatively junior in the law, they know a lot more than I do because they've been through more Indian deals than I have. Um, so it's a humility to understand my place and understand that I can't assume that they will know my objectives or my constraints or what I know, and trying to meet in that productive zone where we're both learning from each other, we're both collaborating. I'm not oversharing, which I have a tendency to do, but I'm not withholding things that would help them do their job. And the same, one of the difficulties is disappointing one's client or disappointing someone you perceive as a senior to you or a customer. The customer's right. I need truth, and I need to show truth and show trust and show vulnerability in order to make those people feel safe to tell it back to me. Now, most M&A lawyers don't need that. They're pretty aggressive folks, but I think that's the best of both worlds when we can collaborate. And yeah, then to just take those lessons and apply them to the next transaction, the next situation.
Humility is something which helps you anywhere or everywhere. And you're right that all M&A lawyers are not necessarily like you, who are humble enough to understand the cultural aspects as well. Keeping all that in mind, you have also negotiated with Fortune 100 companies and Big Four banks. What kind of challenges or rewards have you faced over there? What kind of approach did you take? And if you could share your learnings from those, because obviously while you are doing it, there is immense amount of learning. And sometimes when later you see those deals, you reflect on them and you have more learning. So how has that helped you shape your whole career, I would say, of being a mentor, of being a teacher, of being a person with such humility to accept what all went fine, what all went wrong? So those learnings will be immensely helpful to all of us. Please do share.
That is something that I've been taught, and I think you and I share the same problem-solving background that the engineering education brings. So I think that's a help. And I'm always amazed by the engineers I work with now because they talk about iteration, they talk about and do it, right? And laboratory and learning and scientific approach. In law, you have to be right, and you have to be right now. And if there's a typo in the work, it's awful. And so I just kind of laugh at the approaches. But going back to some of the negotiations, we all need to be as prepared as we can be and as competent as we can be. And the hardest thing, I think, as a lawyer is to be negotiating with a lawyer that is not prepared or is not competent. It just makes it very difficult. And then we're kind of doing both sides of the transaction or the negotiation. And that's not fair to the other client, but it just doesn't make as good a work product. The understanding isn't as keen because that other attorney may not be bringing it. So that was earlier. So that kind of shaped my view about when, more accurately, the team that I was part of would negotiate with Big Four banks. They were experts. I can't claim that I was an expert. I can claim that I knew, but they were true experts in the law of credit reporting and all of its permutations. And they were actually ahead of anybody at the bank because we were specialized as a credit reporting agency, TransUnion, and there's credit reporting in India as well. That's where I had some of my dealings, not much. And the preparation was really important and the competence was important. But also, they had to teach because they were in a position of better knowledge. And it can't be, oh, I know more than you, even though you're at JP Morgan or I pick a name. I have great respect for your position. You got all these things, but let me help you understand how this legislation works and go through it. All right, this is what we have to live with. And this is why this provision's in the contract. And if we do this, if we agree to not have it in the contract, here's the problem for us. And just being very, very matter of fact, and we want to provide this service to you. You're our customer. Help us help you by allowing us to continue to practice the way, within the law, right? And then there are other times that it has to be more aggressive. There's economics or we're bringing a value, but that has to be prepared too. Know what your business objectives are, be hand in hand with everybody else who's going to sign off on that. So I guess the team approach, because none of us know everything and being as prepared as we can be. That would be the lessons I'd impart to trainees and others.
So true. It's too hard to negotiate with someone who's either half prepared or not prepared at all. And obviously, teamwork takes us through anything if the team is perfect and you actually have that particular confidence in that team. Given this particular confidence that you have with your colleagues, with your team members, you have also emphasized on the value of being taught well. And in return to the society, you also love teaching others as well. What is the most impactful piece of advice that you have received till now, which you have kept with yourself and try to pass it on to your mentees? Please do share that particular piece of advice. Probably it will help a number of people henceforth also.
Well, I'll just have to whisper. We can't share these things. No, I think I've shared a lot of the lessons I've learned already, and they're all personal. Maybe that's the lesson, is we have to be true to ourselves. We are who we are. In my belief system, we're created and we're given certain gifts. And I can develop those or I can bury them. I can apply them for good. I can apply them for ill. My shortcomings, they get in the way and I need to address them. But if I spend all my time on shortcomings, I'll never bring them up to the level of my gift. So just try to minimize their distraction and develop my gifts. So be true to myself and focus on what I do well to the best I can and not distracting others with my bad habits.
You keep on teaching, guiding, and mentoring people and colleagues and everyone around, and still keep on continuously learning. How has that experience or that kind of learning helped you over the years? Because I believe you keep learning, but especially when you learn those things, how is it that you implement it either in your personal life or your professional life? Because that's something which we sometimes miss, that we keep learning, but if we do not impart that learning, we forget that learning as well. So how is it that you keep it with yourself and you pass it on to your mentees as well?
Divya, I just keep repeating, right? And I use your name deliberately there because one of the things I'm not good at doing is remembering names. So I really have to focus on that. And so if I learn something new, whether it's somebody's name or a new concept or a new word, if I don't put it into practice, you said it correctly, we will lose what we don't practice. I learned French in high school and barely could I navigate, and I would not want to engage a French speaker. They would immediately go into English because they don't put it into practice. And so some skills, even things I'm relatively competent at, if I don't use it for a period of time, I lose it. They're perishable skills. And they come back much more quickly than something that I'm learning new, but it's just always keeping them into practice. I don't have the luxury of just practicing for practice's sake very often. So I think the way I keep in touch best and apply them is to impart to others what I know, because that keeps it fresh. And then I learn from them because, oh my goodness, like the engineers I work with now, the questions, the logic, the merciless determination. I mean, they're not going to rest until this is right. Ultimately, I have the luxury of being the arbiter of whether the output is good or not in the first instance, right? Before I get reviewed by others, especially the customers. But their thirst for getting it right and to understand and how they can apply things that are just beyond their education, it's wonderful. So teaching, learning, reading, kind of just keeping touch with current issues, even just the synopsis helps. So don't stop learning would be my counsel to trainees or anyone. It keeps fresh as well as learning new things.
Wow, you have your own way of passing on your generous learnings. I believe that you go backpacking as well. How has that helped you unwind with the stress? I believe that everyone on earth definitely gets stressed sometime, even if we say we don't. Please do let us know how has backpacking helped you understand maybe life and law better.
I think backpacking one, it's very difficult to communicate. We have devices now that communicate, but I reserve those for emergencies, which fortunately I haven't had. But getting unplugged, it causes other people to either appreciate or not appreciate or to question what I'm doing. But for me, it just, I'm focused on the very basics of life. Getting to the destination at the end because I can't stay back there forever. I have to keep moving, supplying my needs and the needs of my colleagues, comrades, friends who I'm hiking with, and just how interdependent we are. We get a lot of chance to talk, walking miles at a time. There's a lot of chance to talk. And after the fire is built and the tents are up and there's time to talk, and physically tired and we're all relaxed. So we're kind of our best selves. If we don't have altitude sickness or other issues, but that's a whole other point. And so it does unplug me. It takes me back to what's really important. It's such a privilege what I do. There's so many more difficult ways to make a living. Yeah, stress is self-imposed and I want to do well and I put pressure on myself to do that. And then there are multiple deadlines and I hate disappointing people and inevitably I fall short in a deadline and it doesn't feel good. But getting back to backpacking or other just basic elements of life, whatever it grounds us, puts those things in perspective. It's like it could be so much harder and just breathe a bit, picture where I was when I was feeling serene and get back to it.
So getting back to reality becomes a challenge because once you unwind that much, when you realize that you're fighting for so many simpler needs, coming back to the major fight of the world is working, it becomes a little difficult. But the way you have explained, I just enjoyed that you are physically tired, but still talking to people and understanding how hard it can be for others. You also have a background of being with AmLaw, which are like Fortune 500 companies, also fintech. You have worked in medtech and many more environments. How have these varied practices not only helped you, but helped your team also, given your background in making the decisions, in building your approaches? And also, I will add, how have your solo trips or backpacking trips or anything in the world, whatever you have done, I'm pretty sure everything has a reason and it has given you a different perspective. That's what makes your profile so versatile. How have you taken this approach and how have you seen yourself different after every deal or after every conversation you have had with such big companies, with such different technology fields? And how have you made sure that Bill remains Bill even after having such big deals to his kitty?
Well, Bill was too full of himself in 2016. I was part of a marvelous team and we were able to achieve some really good results. And I thought too much of myself. And so not all of my versatility, perhaps paper manufacturing in-house to fintech in-house was a conscious move. The rest, a little more serendipitous and on my journey to learning my limits and appreciating my place in the world and not that the world was built around me. That's embarrassing to say, but it's the truth. But I'm always curious. And I think that by having a diverse background, it helps me import different ways of thinking and different perspectives to the current situation. As you know, from your career and from your engineering degree and from the many, I should reverse this question, but you're not going to let me. You have so many diverse perspectives, but I see it, you weave it in. When I listen to your podcast or I watch you live, you do that. And I'm able to do that too, because we didn't just grow up in an insular industry. It's like, oh, I got to hop across. And not only that, I was privileged to, because of the securities and governance background, I was privileged to do it at serving the executives and serving the boards and privileged to participate in board and committee meetings and see some really brilliant people and how they would conduct themselves and how they would approach issues. And so every role is different and I get to bring it in. Where it benefits now with kind of a legal AI company is that regardless of what customers we look to, I mostly have some understanding. Now, there are plenty of places I don't, but at least I know where I don't, and we can deal with that. And there are colleagues that also have different backgrounds, but just being able to kind of land, okay, here's the analogy, or this is what that's like, or here's a likely process. Here are some good questions for the customers to tease it out, just because of having experienced so many industries at different levels and intensity. But it comes down to, Divya, just what you do with your life. It's people. You invest in people. And I guess that's the other large life lesson I've learned is that people above tasks. It just is so important to be to respect those relationships, respect those individuals. Without them, I'm not going to do anything. And so just from a practical standpoint, even if there wasn't any ethical or moral implications, it's just good business. Yeah, just to respect people, and whether they're Fortune 500, CEO, director, empathy, kindness, respect. Helps to be a little briefer than I am sometimes. So I've learned to be brief with those people because the time is short and their time is precious. But that's what I'd say.
Wow. I'll also not take too much of your time anymore, but I really would like to understand from your perspective the way you are explaining that we as people, we as humans, we need other humans to be together. And obviously, people before any work, anything, we have to be conscious enough of our relationships. So, how is it that you are preparing your professional journey or personal journey for next, I would say, a decade or so? Given the fact that kind of disruption that we are seeing with the technology or even without technology, things are changing. Be it you think of environment, you think of biases, you think of a number of things which are coming up with or without technology, because we humans have a way of impacting the technology even in better or worse way possible. So how are you preparing for it, and how are you helping your mentees, your colleagues, your team members have that thought process as you have?
All right, you're convicting me now because I'm probably, I'm with a startup, and as a startup culture, the resources aren't abundant, the hours are long, and so there's no teaching. We're all learning together, and we're all kind of crazy. I think what we're all doing in that enterprise is learning what works, what doesn't, learning our limits, learning how to interact with each other under pressure. And we've all done that before, but it's just a new team, new environment. Learning our roles, we are kind of a unique culture in that we don't have formal titles. So that lends itself to kind of going to where your competency is. But I think, kind of to your point, where are things going and what am I looking for? At some point, I'm probably going to have the privilege of not working for compensation. I'm doing that now, and I plan to continue to do that for a while. And at some point, I'm going to say, I'm tired of that responsibility and the ties that go with it. And so I want to do what I want to do. And I think, to me, the big issue is democratization of justice, access to justice. And my hope is that I can leverage whatever skills I can in adopting this new technology and working with it, and assist that same technology in helping leverage those dedicated individuals that spend their time representing people without means, people who need a lawyer, can't afford it, and see what I can do to help their practice of law and help society, kind of understand the imperfections of the legal system are broadcast all the time. But our nations, our societies wouldn't exist well without the law. I mean, Shakespeare, kill all the lawyers. That was not a vindictive statement. It was a statement to clear the way for revolution because they'd be in our way. And our country and its current election choice has demonstrated that maybe the rule of law isn't as important as it should be. And that concerns me. So I don't know what I'll be able to do. I'm a small drop in a big stream, but those are the kind of things that I would prepare for. In terms of where I continue to practice, I'd think about, how am I able to learn quickly? Am I in a position where I'm getting simulated learning in addition to the case that comes every year or every 5 years? Because that kind of cycle is not going to be soon enough. We're going to have to make our first year become fourth year skilled in a year. And so how am I going to learn that? What training is available to me? What can I read? What simulations are available to me in addition to my daily work? And then just keep abreast, because things are changing so quickly, finding trusted sources of information, because we can't, can we explain how our cars work? Can we explain how our light switches work? Probably not, but we know how to use them and how to access somebody that can fix our car. And that's what we need to be able to do, I think, is find what our limits are, but keep abreast with what we can do.
Wow, beautiful session we have had today with you. Thank you so much for being so candid and so clear about your thoughts. I really want to thank you for writing everything so clearly that you are not a coder, but you are still teaching engineers to understand how do we do law as humans. And that's something which is very, very fascinating. And the work which you are doing is so important that integration has to come somewhere. And we are really thankful at Super Lawyers that today you carved out so much of time from your busy schedule for us to interview you and share your journey with learners. It has been a pleasure and a very beautiful journey of past an hour or so. And I really would request you to please keep on doing this because this is something which is required. We have to find that interaction point in between so many streams that are in the world, especially engineering and law. So yes, thank you so much once again for agreeing to be here at Super Lawyers, and it has been a pleasure.
Divya, thank you. I am honored. And you're such a shining light of how you interact and how you have such a great diversity of focus, and yet you will focus on each individual and give them your time. I really don't know how you get it all done and have a great heart and a great attitude all through the time. So it's a real honor to be able to speak with you like this. Thank you.
I would say I learned from the best. One of them being you. I keep following you on LinkedIn. And once again, thank you so much. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.